The autumn sun painted golden streaks across the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Cathedral as guests filled the polished wooden pews. Natasha Reynolds stood in the bridal suite, her reflection showing a woman who looked every bit the perfect bride. Her champagne-colored gown flowed like liquid silk, and her dark hair was swept into an elegant twist adorned with pearl pins. Yet behind her carefully applied makeup, her hazel eyes held a flicker of something she refused to name. "You look absolutely stunning," declared her maid of honor, Rebecca, adjusting the delicate lace veil that cascaded down Natasha's back. Rebecca had been her friend since high school, and she knew Natasha better than anyone. "Derek is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Natasha managed to smile, but her fingers trembled slightly as she held her bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus. "Do you think we ordered enough champagne for the reception?" Rebecca laughed and touched her friend's shoulder. "Natasha, you planned this wedding with the same precision you use for your biggest clients. Everything is perfect. Stop worrying about details and start thinking about the amazing life you are about to begin." Through the window, Natasha could see guests arriving in their finest attire. The Hamilton family had spared no expense, and neither had her own parents. This was the wedding of the season, uniting two prominent Chicago families. Derek Hamilton, with his sharp mind and distinguished family name, was everything her parents had hoped for. He was stable, successful, and devoted to building a future that looked perfect on paper. Her mother, Patricia Reynolds, swept into the room wearing a powder blue designer suit. "Darling, the photographer wants a few shots before the ceremony." "Your father is getting emotional already." She dabbed at her own eyes with a handkerchief. "My little girl, getting married to such a wonderful man." Natasha allowed herself to be positioned and photographed, smiling on cue, tilting her head just so. She had spent years perfecting the art of appearing composed, meeting expectations, of being the daughter everyone admired. Event planning had taught her that every detail mattered, that control and precision created magic. Her own wedding was simply her grandest production yet. The string quartet began playing softly in the cathedral. Guests were seated, programs were distributed, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Natasha's father, Robert Reynolds, appeared at the bridal suite door in his tailored tuxedo. His silver hair was combed back, and his eyes glistened with pride. "My beautiful daughter," he said, offering his arm. "Are you ready?" Natasha nodded, taking his arm and feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. They walked down the corridor toward the cathedral entrance. She could hear the murmur of 300 guests. Could imagine Derek standing at the altar in his perfectly fitted suit. Could picture the flower arrangements she had personally selected for every surface. The massive wooden doors opened, and the wedding march began. Every head turned to watch Natasha glide down the aisle on her father's arm. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on Derek, who stood tall and confident beside his best man. His expression was one of satisfaction, of a man who had secured exactly what he wanted. There was affection there, certainly. But Natasha noticed it was the same expression he wore when closing a successful business deal. She reached the altar, and her father placed her hand in Derek's before taking his seat. The priest, Father Thomas, a kindly man in his 60s with warm brown eyes, smiled at the couple. "Dearly beloved Father Thomas," began, his voice carrying through the cathedral. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Natasha Marie Reynolds and Derek James Hamilton in holy matrimony." Natasha's heart hammered in her chest. She told herself it was normal wedding nerves, that every bride felt this flutter of panic. Derek squeezed her hand, and she glanced at him. He looked so sure, so certain that this was right. Father Thomas continued with the traditional readings. A cousin read from Corinthians about love being patient and kind. Derek's sister performed a beautiful rendition of Avenue. Maria, everything unfolded exactly according to the timeline Natasha had created months ago. Yet with each passing moment, that unnamed feeling in her chest grew stronger. "Marriage is a sacred bond," Father Thomas said. "Looking between Natasha and Derek requires honesty, trust, and a love that runs deeper than circumstance. Before we proceed with the vows, I must ask if there is anyone present who knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage." He paused, as tradition dictated. It was meant to be a formality, a moment of ceremonial silence before moving forward. Natasha held her breath, waiting for the silence to pass. Then came the sound of movement from the back of the cathedral. "Hey," man stood up. Natasha's blood ran cold. She knew that silhouette knew the way he stood, knew him in a way that went beyond logic or reason. Slowly, she turned her head, and her eyes confirmed what her heart already knew. Julian Cross stood in the last pew, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was slightly longer than she remembered, and his blue eyes burned with an intensity that cut across the distance between them. He had changed in the 5 years since she had last seen him. There was a hardness to him now, a confidence that came from building an empire from nothing. But beneath that exterior, she saw the boy she had loved with reckless abandon in college. The cathedral erupted in shocked whispers. Derek's hand tightened painfully around hers. Her mother gasped audibly. Rebecca stood frozen, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "I object," Julian said, his voice steady and clear. He began walking down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "I have a reason why this marriage should not proceed." "This is outrageous," Derek hissed, releasing Natasha's hand and stepping forward. Security removed this man immediately, but Father Thomas raised his hand. "Please let us maintain the sanctity of this place. Sir, you have made a serious claim. What is your objection?" Julian reached the front of the cathedral and turned to face Natasha directly. The years melted away as their eyes met. She saw pain there, and regret, and something else that made her knees weak. "My objection is that Natasha does not love him," Julian said simply. "Not the way she deserves to love someone. Not the way she once loved me." Derek's face flushed red with anger. "You have no right to speak about what my fiancé feels. Natasha, tell him. Tell everyone that this man means nothing to you." All eyes turned to Natasha. Her parents looked horrified. Derek's family appeared ready to call the police. Rebecca watched her with a mixture of concern and something that might have been hope. And Julian looked at her as if she was the only person in the entire world. Natasha opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she could not find the script she had written for this moment, because this moment was never supposed to happen. "Natasha?" Derek's voice was sharp now, demanding. "Say something." She began, her voice barely a whisper. "I need a moment. A moment." Derek laughed bitterly. "This lunatic crashes our wedding, makes wild accusations, and you need a moment?" Julian took another step closer, ignoring Derek entirely. "Natasha, I know I have no right to be here. I know I walked away 5 years ago when I chose to build my company over building a life with you. I know I broke your heart." His voice cracked slightly. "But I have spent every single day of those 5 years regretting that choice. And when I heard you were getting married, I realized I could not let you make a mistake based on what I did wrong." "This is insane," Derek snapped. "Father Thomas, are you going to allow this circus to continue?" Father Thomas looked troubled, but compassionate. "Miss Reynolds, would you like to take a moment in private to collect yourself?" Natasha nodded gratefully. She gathered her dress and walked quickly toward the side door that led to a small chapel. Behind her, she could hear Derek arguing with Julian, her mother wailing, and 300 guests talking at once in the quiet chapel. Natasha sank onto a wooden bench and buried her face in her hands. The veil fell forward, obscuring her vision, and she ripped it off with shaking fingers. The door opened behind her. She expected Rebecca, but when she looked up, Julian stood in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said, remaining by the door. "I'm sorry for doing this to you, for disrupting your wedding, for making everything complicated. But Natasha, I could not stay silent." 5 years, she whispered. 5 years, Julian. Not a word. Not a call. Not a letter. You chose your dreams over us, and I accepted that. I moved on. Did you? He asked gently. Did you really move on? Or did you just find someone safe? Someone who would never ask you to take risks or follow your heart. His words struck deep because they echoed thoughts she had been suppressing for months. Derek was safe. Derek was the logical choice. Derek represented everything she should want. But when Julian walked away 5 years ago, He had taken a piece of her heart with him that had never quite healed. Safe. Natasha stood up, anger flashing through her confusion. You think choosing Derek is about being safe? Maybe it is about choosing someone who actually stayed. Someone who did not abandon me to chase dollar signs in venture capital meetings. Julian flinched but held his ground. You are right. I abandoned you. I chose ambition over love, and it was the worst mistake of my life. He stepped further into the chapel, his voice raw with emotion. But Natasha, I was 27 years old, with a revolutionary idea, and investors breathing down my neck. I had a choice between staying in Chicago with you or moving to Silicon Valley for 6 months to launch my company. I thought 6 months would not matter. I thought we were strong enough. 6 months turned into a year, Natasha said bitterly, and then you stopped calling. You stopped answering my messages. You just disappeared from my life like I meant nothing. You meant everything, Julian said fiercely. But I was drowning. The company nearly failed 3 times in that first year. I was working 20-hour days, sleeping in my office, eating ramen, because I had poured every cent into the business. I could not ask you to wait for a man who might lose everything. He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. I convinced myself I was setting you free to find someone better, someone who could give you the life you deserved. That was not your decision to make, Natasha whispered, tears streaming down her face now. You did not get to decide what I deserved or what I could handle. You just left. The chapel door burst open and Rebecca rushed in. Followed closely by Derek, her friend immediately came to her side while Derek positioned himself between Natasha and Julian like a barrier. I think you have said enough, Derek told Julian coldly. You had your dramatic moment. Now leave before I have you arrested for harassment. Julian ignored him, his eyes still locked on Natasha. Do you remember the night we met? At that terrible poetry reading in the campus coffee house? Despite everything, Natasha felt a ghost of a smile touch her lips. You spilled coffee all over my English literature notes. You told me I had just destroyed your entire semester, Julian continued, a matching smile appearing. So I stayed up all night rewriting them for you. My handwriting was awful, but you said it was the most romantic gesture anyone had ever made. Stop it, Derek demanded. Stop trying to manipulate her with nostalgia. But the memories were flooding back now, unbidden and powerful. Natasha remembered late-night study sessions that turned into deep conversations about dreams and fears. She remembered Julian teaching her to skateboard in empty parking lots at midnight. She remembered the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the universe. She remembered feeling truly seen, truly known, in a way she had not felt since. Remember our graduation day? Julian asked softly. We stood on the bridge over the Chicago River, and you told me about wanting to start your own event planning company. You had this whole vision of creating meaningful experiences, not just fancy parties. You wanted to plan weddings for couples who could not afford the big venues, community celebrations for neighborhoods that needed joy. She had forgotten that version of herself. The idealistic girl who wanted to make a difference, not just make money. Somewhere along the way, she had become someone else. Someone practical. Someone who planned weddings for the wealthy and told herself it was enough. What is your point? Derek asked impatiently. That you two had some college romance? People grow up. They move on. Natasha has moved on. To a real relationship with a real future, have you told him? Julian asked Natasha. About your real dreams? About wanting to do more than plan society weddings? Natasha opened her eyes and looked at Derek. His handsome face was tight with anger and something that looked like fear. In 3 years of dating, had she ever truly shared her deeper dreams with him? Or had she simply molded herself into the woman he wanted? Derek, she began slowly, I need to be honest with you. Oh. Derek said sharply, do not do this. Do not let this man waltz in here and destroy what we have built together. What have we built? The question escaped before Natasha could stop it. Derek, when is the last time we had a real conversation? About something other than your cases, or the wedding plans, or which country club to join? Derek looked genuinely confused. We talk all the time. We have dinner together. We attend events. We attend events where you network, and I smile beside you, Natasha said, the truth spilling out now. We have dinner where you talk about your day and I listen. Derek, do you even know what I want? What truly matters to me? I know you want stability, Derek said defensively. Security. A good life. Everyone wants those things, Natasha replied. But what about passion? What about laughter? What about feeling alive? Derek's face hardened. So that is it? He shows up with some pretty words about the past, and you are just going to throw away everything we have. The life we planned? The future we were about to start? The future you planned, Natasha corrected gently. Derek, you are a good man. You have been kind to me. But have we ever truly been in love? Or have we just been two people who looked good together on paper? The chapel fell silent, except for the distant sounds of chaos still happening in the main cathedral. Derek stared at Natasha, as if seeing her for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. I see. So I have wasted 3 years of my life on someone who was never really committed. Turned to Julian. Congratulations. You have successfully ruined what could have been a good marriage. Could have been a comfortable marriage, Julian said quietly. But Natasha deserves more than comfort. She deserves extraordinary. Derek laughed bitterly. And you're going to give her that? The man who abandoned her once already? How long before your next big business opportunity comes along and you disappear again? Never, Julian said with absolute certainty. Because I learned the hardest way possible that success means nothing without someone to share it with. My company is worth hundreds of millions of dollars now, but I would trade it all to have those 5 years back with Natasha. How convenient that you only realized this after you became rich, Derek shot back. You are right, Julian admitted. It took me far too long to understand what mattered. I was an idiot. But at least I am here now, fighting for her, instead of standing at an altar with a woman I settled for. Derek's composure cracked. He turned back to Natasha, and she saw real hurt in his eyes beneath the anger. Is that what I am to you? Someone you settled for? Natasha felt tears streaming down her face again. Derek, I convinced myself that what we had was enough. That stability and compatibility were more important than passion. But standing here now, being forced to be honest, I realize I have been lying to both of us. So that is it, Derek said flatly. You are calling off the wedding. I am so sorry, Natasha whispered. You deserve someone who loves you completely, who chooses you without hesitation, and I am not that person. Derek stood still for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he removed his boutonniere and dropped it on the chapel bench. I hope he is worth it, he said to Natasha. Then to Julian, and I hope you realize what you put her through. Because if you hurt her again, I will destroy you. Legally, financially, every way I can. He walked out of the chapel without looking back. Rebecca immediately wrapped her arms around Natasha, who was trembling from head to toe. Oh, sweetie, Rebecca murmured. What have you done? I do not know, Natasha said, her voice breaking. I just know I could not say those vows. Not when they would have been a lie. The chapel door opened again, and this time Natasha's parents entered. Her mother's face was blotchy from crying, and her father looked a decade older than he had an hour ago. Natasha Marie Reynolds, her mother said, her voice shaking. Do you have any idea what you have just done? The humiliation. The scandal? Derek's family is threatening legal action over the wedding expenses. Let them, Natasha said wearily. I will pay back every cent. This is not about money, her father said heavily. This is about your future. Derek was a good match, stable, from a good family. And you threw it away for what? A man who left you before? A man I never stopped loving, Natasha said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. Dad, I know this looks crazy. I know I have disappointed you. But I cannot marry Derek when my heart belongs to someone else. Your heart? Her mother scoffed. You were 29 years old. You need to think with your head, not your heart. Maybe that has been my problem all along, Natasha replied. I have been thinking too much and feeling too little. I became someone I barely recognize. Someone who plans perfect weddings but forgot how to believe in love. Her parents exchanged a look. Finally, her father sighed. We need to go address the guests. This is a disaster, but we will handle it with as much dignity as possible. He looked at Julian with undisguised dislike. I hope you know what you have done, young man. After her parents left, Natasha sank back onto the bench, still in her wedding dress, makeup ruined by tears. Rebecca sat beside her while Julian kept a respectful distance. What happens now? Rebecca asked practically. Because there are 300 people out there who came for a wedding? I need to face them, Natasha said, though the thought made her nauseous. I need to apologize and explain. But I do owe them an explanation, Natasha insisted. They took time out of their lives, traveled here, brought gifts. The least I can do is be honest. She stood up, squared her shoulders, and walked back toward the main cathedral. The conversation noise died immediately as she appeared. 300 faces turned toward her with expressions, ranging from shock to judgment to fascination. Natasha walked to the front and faced the crowd. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I want to apologize to all of you for what happened here today. You came to witness a wedding, and instead you have been subjected to drama and chaos. That was never my intention. She took a deep breath. But I cannot apologize for telling the truth. I cannot apologize for refusing to make vows I could not keep. She saw some people nodding, others whispering to their neighbors. Derek is a wonderful man, and he deserves someone who loves him without reservation. I am not that person, and it would have been wrong to pretend otherwise. Her eyes found her parents in the front row. I know this is embarrassing. I know people will talk. But I would rather face temporary embarrassment than a lifetime of regret. She looked at Julian, who stood at the back of the cathedral. 5 years ago, I lost someone I loved because we both made mistakes. Today, I have been given a chance to not make another mistake, and I am taking it. The days following the wedding that never was blurred together in a haze of phone calls, returned gifts, and difficult conversations. Natasha moved out of the apartment she had shared with Derek and temporarily moved in with Rebecca while she figured out her next steps. The social media storm was intense. Photos from the wedding had leaked, and suddenly Natasha was the subject of countless articles and blog posts. Some painted her as a romantic heroine who chose love over convention. Others called her selfish and cruel for humiliating Derek publicly. Natasha tried to ignore it all. Derek's parents did indeed pursue legal action over the wedding costs. And Natasha spent hours with lawyers working out a settlement. She drained her savings to pay her share, refusing to let Julian help despite his repeated offers. I need to handle this myself, she told him during one of their careful, tentative coffee meetings. I created this mess. I need to clean it up. Julian had checked into a hotel in Chicago, waiting to see what Natasha wanted. They met every few days, always in public places, always with Rebecca or another friend nearby. Natasha was not ready to trust her heart completely. Not yet. Tell me about your company, she said one afternoon as they walked along the Chicago River. The same river where they had stood on graduation day. What exactly do you do? Julian explained how his company had developed software that helped hospitals and clinics in underserved communities coordinate patient care more efficiently. It started as just a database system, but it has evolved into this whole platform that saves lives by making sure people do not fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. Natasha stopped walking. You are saving lives with your work. In a small way, yes, Julian said modestly. It is not glamorous, but it matters. She realized then that, while she had been judging him for choosing business over love, he had actually been building something meaningful, something that aligned with the values they had once shared. I have been planning weddings for people who spend more on flowers than most families earn in a year, she said quietly. When did I become that person? You are not that person, Julian said firmly. You've just got lost for a while. We both did. Over the following weeks, Natasha began taking steps to find herself again. She gave notice to her high-end event planning firm and started developing a business plan for her own company. One focused on creating beautiful celebrations for couples with limited budgets. Rebecca agreed to partner with her, handling the logistics, while Natasha handled design. Her parents slowly came around. Her father called first, his voice gruff as he asked if she was okay. Her mother took longer, but eventually invited Natasha to Sunday dinner, where they had a painfully honest conversation about expectations and choices. "I just wanted you to be secure," her mother admitted. "I married your father because he was stable and successful. I convinced myself that was enough. But was it?" Natasha asked gently. Her mother was quiet for a long time. "I learned to be content." "But content is not the same as happy, is it?" 3 months after the canceled wedding, Natasha and Julian sat on that same bridge over the Chicago River. The autumn had turned to winter, and snow was beginning to fall. "I've been thinking," Natasha said, watching the snowflakes drift down to the dark water below, "about what I want. What I really want, not what I think I should want." And Julian asked carefully, "I want to build my business. I want to create something meaningful. I want to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet without depending on anyone else." She turned to look at him. "But I also want to give us a real chance. An honest chance, without the ghosts of the past or the pressure of expectations." "What does that look like?" Julian asked. "It looks like taking things slowly. It looks like both of us being completely honest about our needs and fears. It looks like building something real instead of just relying on chemistry and nostalgia." Julian nodded. "I can do that. I want to do that. And if your company needs you to travel, or if an opportunity comes up that takes you away, we talk about it," Natasha continued. "We make decisions together. No more noble sacrifices or assumptions about what the other person wants." "Together," Julian agreed. "Always together from now on." They kissed then, as snow fell around them and the city lights reflected off the river. It was not the dramatic kiss of a romance movie. It was softer than that, more real. It was the kiss of 2 people who had learned hard lessons about love and were choosing to try again, wiser and more honest than before. 6 months later, Natasha stood in a community center on the south side of Chicago, putting final touches on decorations for a wedding. Not her own wedding, but one for a young couple who had a limited budget but unlimited love. She had transformed the simple space with creativity and care. Using affordable materials and innovative ways to create something beautiful, Julian arrived with boxes of flowers he had picked up from the wholesale market. He had become her unofficial assistant on these events, finding joy in helping create meaningful celebrations. "The bride is going to cry when she sees this," he said, looking around at what Natasha had created. "You have an amazing gift." "We have an amazing gift," Natasha corrected. "This would not work without you." Her company was growing steadily. Word spread about the event planner who created magazine-worthy weddings on tiny budgets. And suddenly Natasha had more clients than she could handle. She hired 2 assistants and started training them in her approach. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "The bride is here, and oh my God, Natasha, her dress is gorgeous. She made it herself." As Natasha watched the young bride walk down the makeshift aisle toward her groom, she felt tears in her eyes. This was what love looked like. Not perfect or polished, but real and brave and willing to stand up in front of family and friends and make promises that meant everything. After the ceremony, as guests danced to music from a borrowed sound system and ate food prepared by the groom's family, Julian found Natasha watching from the sidelines. "You made this happen," he said softly. "You gave them a day they will remember forever." "We made this happen," Natasha replied, leaning into him. "Together." That night, as they walked back to Natasha's new apartment in a neighborhood she actually loved instead of one that impressed other people, Julian stopped suddenly. "I have something to ask you," he said. Natasha's heart jumped. "Okay, not that," he said quickly, reading her expression. "Not yet. We agreed to take things slow, and I meant it. But I want to know if you would consider moving to a bigger place with me. Not because we should, but because I hate every night we spend apart, and I think we are ready." Natasha considered the question seriously. They had been dating officially for 6 months, but they had known each other for over a decade. They had hurt each other and healed. They had both grown and changed. And most importantly, they had learned to communicate honestly about their needs and fears. "Yes," she said, "I would like that very much." They found a loft in a converted warehouse, a space big enough for both of them to work from home when needed. Natasha set up a design studio in one corner while Julian created an office in another. They adopted a rescue dog named River after the place where they had reunited. They hosted dinners for friends and family. They argued about dishes and learned to fight fair. They built a life that was messy and real and infinitely better than anything Natasha had imagined in her. Perfect wedding plans. 1 year after the wedding that never was. Derek sent Natasha an unexpected message. He had met someone new, he wrote, and wanted Natasha to know that he had forgiven her. More than that, he thanked her for being brave enough to tell the truth instead of trapping them both in a loveless marriage. I understand now what you meant, his message concluded. About deserving more than comfortable? I found someone who makes me feel truly alive. I hope you found the same. Natasha showed the message to Julian, who read it with a thoughtful expression. Do you have any regrets? He asked about that day at the cathedral. Natasha thought about the question. She thought about the scandal and the financial cost and the broken relationships that had taken time to mend. She thought about the judgment she had faced and the courage it had taken to choose an uncertain path over a secure one. No, she said finally, not a single regret. That day was the day I started living my truth instead of someone else's expectations. That day was the day I chose love, real love, over comfort. How could I regret that? 2 years after the almost wedding, on a quiet morning with just their closest friends and family present, Natasha and Julian were married by a justice of the peace in a small ceremony by the Chicago River. Natasha wore a simple cream dress she found at a vintage shop. Julian wore jeans and a button-down shirt. Rebecca officiated because she had gotten ordained online just for the occasion. There were no 300 guests, no elaborate flowers, no designer gown. There was only honesty and love and a promise that they both meant with their whole hearts. When the ceremony ended and they were declared married, Natasha looked at Julian and saw her future. Not a perfect future, not an easy future, but a real one. A future built on truth and trust and a love that had survived separation and doubt and had emerged stronger. Julian asked as they walked along the river after the ceremony, hand in hand. I am thinking about that day in the cathedral when you stood up and objected, Natasha said. I was so angry at you for disrupting my perfect wedding, but you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. What gift? The courage to be honest with myself, Natasha replied. The courage to choose what was real over what looked perfect. The courage to believe that I deserved extraordinary love instead of settling for good enough. Julian stopped walking and pulled her close. We both deserve it, and we are going to spend the rest of our lives proving that to each other. As they stood by the river where their story had begun and been reborn, Natasha knew that this was just the beginning of their real adventure together. There would be challenges and compromises ahead. There would be moments of doubt and difficulty. But they would face it all together with honesty and love and the knowledge that they had both been brave enough to choose each other when it mattered most. The snow began to fall again, just as it had on that bridge a year earlier. But this time, Natasha was not afraid of the future. This time she was ready for whatever came next. Because love, real love, was not about perfect moments or flawless planning. It was about choosing someone every single day and having them choose you back. It was about building something real and lasting, brick by brick, mistake by mistake, truth by truth. And that was exactly what she and Julian tended to do. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the converted warehouse loft as Natasha sat at her design table, sketching concepts for an upcoming community celebration. River, their golden retriever mix, dozed contentedly at her feet. The space had evolved over the years, filled with photographs from weddings they had created, artwork from local artists they supported, and the comfortable clutter of a life fully lived. Julian emerged from his office, stretching after a video conference with his team. His company had expanded internationally, but he had structured it so he could work primarily from Chicago, traveling only when absolutely necessary, and always with Natasha's knowledge and input. How's the Martinez anniversary party coming along? He asked, kissing the top of her head as he looked over her shoulder at the sketches. "Beautifully," Natasha replied, leaning back against him. 50 years of marriage deserve something special. They have a tiny budget, but I have some ideas involving their grandchildren's artwork and photos from every decade of their marriage. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Board meeting at 3. Don't forget, we're voting on the scholarship program." Natasha smiled. Their company, True Celebrations, had grown beyond anything she had imagined. They now had a staff of 12, had planned over 300 weddings and community events, and had just established a nonprofit arm that provided free event planning for families facing financial hardship. The scholarship program Rebecca mentioned would provide training and mentorship for young people interested in event planning, particularly those from underserved communities. It was Natasha's way of ensuring that the industry she loved became more diverse and accessible. "I should get ready," Natasha said, standing and stretching. "Big day today." "The biggest," Julian agreed, his eyes twinkling with a secret at the board meeting that afternoon. Natasha presented the scholarship program proposal to enthusiastic approval. Rebecca had already secured initial funding from several donors, and they planned to accept their first cohort of students in the fall. After the meeting, as Natasha was gathering her materials, Julian appeared in the doorway of the conference room with a mysterious expression. "Can you come with me for a moment?" he asked. "There is something I need to show you." Intrigued, Natasha followed him out of the office and into his car. They drove through the city, past familiar neighborhoods, until they pulled up in front of an empty storefront in a vibrant, diverse neighborhood on the west side. "What are we doing here?" Natasha asked as Julian produced a key. "You will see," he said, unlocking the door. The space inside was raw but full of potential. Large windows let in plenty of natural light, and the layout was open and inviting. But what caught Natasha's attention was the gathering of people inside. Her parents stood near the back, smiling. Rebecca was there with her new husband. Former clients, colleagues, and friends filled the space, all grinning at her confusion. "What is all this?" Natasha asked. Julian took her hand and led her to the center of the room. 5 years ago, you chose to follow your heart instead of following expectations. You've built an amazing company that has touched hundreds of lives, but I know you have been dreaming bigger." He gestured around the space. "This building is yours. Well, ours. I bought it last month. It is going to be the True Celebrations Center, a space where you can not only run your business, but also offer workshops, host community events, and provide a beautiful venue for couples who cannot afford traditional spaces." Natasha felt tears streaming down her face. "Julian, this is too much." "It is exactly right," he said firmly. "And you are not doing this alone. Everyone here has contributed. Your parents made a significant donation. Rebecca has been planning the renovation. Former clients have volunteered their skills as contractors, designers, and organizers. This is not just me giving you something. This is a community coming together to support the vision you have been building." Her mother stepped forward, her eyes also wet with tears. "Natasha, I spent so many years trying to push you toward what I thought was the right path. But watching what you have built, watching how you have stayed true to yourself and created something that truly matters, I realize you were right all along. I am so proud of you." Her father nodded, clearing his throat roughly. "Your mother and I want to be part of this. We want to support what you are doing here." Rebecca bounced forward excitedly. "There is more. We have already secured commitments from several community organizations to partner with us. The City Council is interested in featuring this as a model program, and we have 3 foundations that want to provide ongoing funding for the scholarship program." Natasha looked around at all the faces, at the people who had supported her journey, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will do it," Julian said. "Say you will take this dream and make it real," as Natasha said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." The celebration that followed was pure joy. Someone had brought champagne and cupcakes. Music played from a portable speaker. People danced in the empty space, imagining what it would become. As the afternoon turned to evening and people began to leave, Natasha and Julian stood alone in the center of their new space. River had been brought over and was exploring every corner with enthusiastic sniffing. "I cannot believe you did all this," Natasha said, still overwhelmed. "I had help," Julian reminded her. "And besides, you gave me my life back 5 years ago. You gave us both permission to choose love over fear. This is just me returning the favor." Natasha turned to face him fully. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not shown up that day? If you had let me marry Derek?" Julian considered the question seriously. "I think you would have figured it out eventually. Maybe not that day, but someday. You are too honest, too real, to live a lie forever. I just happened to force the issue." "You saved me from years of regret," Natasha said. "From a life half-lived? I will never be able to thank you enough for that." "You thank me every day," Julian said, "by being exactly who you are. By building this incredible life, by refusing to settle for anything less than extraordinary." As they stood in their new space, with the evening light painting everything gold, Natasha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that devastating moment at the altar to this moment of pure possibility, it had been a path of growth and discovery. She thought about the Natasha who had stood in that bridal suite 5 years ago, trying to convince herself that comfort was enough. She thought about the terror of admitting the truth in front of 300 people. She thought about the difficult months of rebuilding her life and her relationships. But she also thought about the incredible moments. The first wedding she had planned on her own terms, the letter from a bride thanking her for making the most important day of her life beautiful, despite a tiny budget. The moment when her mother finally said she was proud. The quiet evenings with Julian, building a partnership based on honesty and mutual support. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, as he so often did. "I am thinking about choices," Natasha said. "About how one moment of courage can change everything. About how the hardest decisions sometimes lead to the most beautiful outcomes." She looked around the empty space that would soon be filled with celebration and community. "I am thinking about how grateful I am that you loved me enough to risk everything, and that I loved myself enough to listen." Julian pulled her close. "We still have work to do, you know. This space needs a complete renovation. We need to hire more staff. We need to develop curriculum for the training program. We need to market the venue. We need to establish partnerships. We need to figure out scheduling and pricing and 1,000 other details." "I know," Natasha said, smiling against his chest. "It is going to be hard and complicated and sometimes frustrating, but we will do it together," Julian finished. "Together," Natasha agreed. They locked up the space and walked to their car hand in hand, River trotting happily beside them. As they drove through the city toward home, Natasha watched the lights come on across Chicago. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love. Somewhere out there, someone was facing a difficult choice. Somewhere out there, someone was finding the courage to choose truth over comfort. And tomorrow, Natasha would wake up and continue building a life and a business dedicated to celebrating those choices, to honoring love in all its messy, complicated, beautiful reality, to creating spaces where people could mark the most important moments of their lives with dignity and joy, regardless of their bank account balance. The girl who had almost married the wrong man was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who had learned that true love required honesty and courage, and who had built something meaningful from the ashes of her almost dash mistake. As they pulled into their parking space and headed up to the loft, Natasha felt a profound sense of peace. Her life was not perfect. There were still challenges to face, relationships to nurture, and dreams to pursue. But it was real. It was hers. And it was built on a foundation of truth and love that could weather any storm. That night, as they prepared for bed, Julian mentioned casually that his company was considering opening an office in Seattle and had asked if he would relocate to oversee it. Natasha felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, but this time, she did not let it control her. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I would discuss it with my wife," Julian said, using the word he still loved to say. "That we would make the decision together. That I would only consider it if there was a way to structure it so. I could be based primarily in Chicago with occasional travel to Seattle, and that if they could not work with those terms, I would decline. And if they say no? Natasha asked. Then I say no, Julian said simply. My life is here. Our business is here. Our community is here. No opportunity is worth sacrificing what we have built. Natasha wrapped her arms around him, feeling grateful beyond words. We can make it work if you want to do it. We have learned how to communicate, how to support each other's dreams while protecting our relationship. Let's talk about it tomorrow, Julian said. After we have both had time to think, no rushed decisions. No assumptions about what the other person wants. Just honest conversation. Natasha agreed. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Natasha's last thought was of gratitude. Gratitude for the courage that had changed her life. Gratitude for second chances and honest love. Gratitude for a partner who chose her every single day and gave her the space to choose him back. The wedding that never was had turned out to be the beginning of everything that mattered. And that, Natasha thought, as sleep claimed her, was the greatest love story of all. Not the one where everything went according to plan, but the one where two people were brave enough to tear up the plan and write a new story together. It's a story that was still being written, one honest choice at a time. The end.